Let's take a look at the diagrams of the reproductive systems. This is the symbol for female, so we'll start with that one, and then we'll move off on to the male side. And the reason we're going to do it in a diagram first is because when you get to the actual dissection, it gets a little bit messy and a little bit confusing. So we'll just kind of work the progression here. So first of all, let's start with the ovary. Okay, this is going to be found inside the body cavity. The ovary is there for making the egg, and it actually stores it. You're born with a certain number of eggs, and then just gradually throughout your life, as you go through and sexually mature, each egg would be released slowly, one by one, each month during menstrual cycles. So that's going to be storing those eggs kind of in situ until they're kind of awoken and ready to be expressed. Now what I'm drawing next are what we call fimbriae. Fimbriae are these little finger-like structures that are meant to catch the egg as is expressed. And so the two systems, the tube and the ovary itself, are actually not fused together, which is a design flaw. The egg could go outside and make an ectopic pregnancy or cause some other problems, but the fimbriae are there designed to catch the egg and actually funnel it into the next thing I'm going to be drawing, which go by a couple different names. You could call them the oviducts, you could call it fallopian tubes, you could call them a couple different things in here. Fallopian tube is just fine, oviduct is fine, or whatever. So in the cat, what would happen is the egg would get fertilized in here, as it does in the human. Fertilization has to take place in the fallopian tube itself, but in the cat, that would actually embed in those walls. In the human, those tubes are way too small. They wouldn't house something as large, so that egg would be fertilized and continue on down. Okay, so we're going to be referring to the human at this point. Just know that in the cat, they'd actually embed in here if you have something with multiple litters. So the fallopian tubes themselves are labeled here, and that's going to funnel the egg down into the uterus itself. Okay, so we've got two different sides, so these are going to be referred to as the horns of the uterus. Okay, it's just the fusion point going down into the uterus itself. And again, within the human, that's where the fetus would actually be housed. Okay, so this wall, as the menstrual cycle gets further and further along, it builds up thickness in this wall, expecting a fertilized egg. And so if the egg is successfully fertilized and it's viable, it would implant right in there. Now, as that fetus develops, then we'd have to seal it inside. So there's a thick muscle in there referred to as the cervix. And sometimes you hear in child labor somebody is dilated or something like that. What that is the cervix itself will actually thin out because it's a very thick band of tissue, muscle tissue that holds it inside. So that would get thinner and it would actually start to dilate open to allow for the baby to be born. So the cervix is right there. That would seal it up inside, and then that would lead to the vagina itself. Okay, the vagina is obviously going to be the chamber that receives the penis. That's where sexual reproduction would happen. That would receive the sperm. Sperm would then go up into the uterus, have to decide which tube to go down. Remember, in a human, only one egg is expressed at a time. So it would have to go up one of these branches, hopefully find an egg in there, and try to fertilize it. Okay, so that's basically how that works. And to put it in respect to the other systems that we have, we always refer to this as the urogenital system because we also have the urinary bladder sitting on top. Again, this is just a diagram, so you'll see it better with the actual dissection. But the urinary bladder is going to be storing the urine, obviously, and coming out of that is a separate tube called the urethra. Okay, now that urethra is going to follow right along with the vagina and have two separate tubes there. That's different because in the male they'll actually fuse into one. Now the urinary bladder will obviously have these two tubes that lead into it coming from the kidney. Okay, so the kidney would be sitting like this. Obviously my scale work is going to be completely off here. That's okay. Okay, so the kidney is up here, and we call this the ureter. Okay, so you see the system, the urinary system is actually tied to that. We have the kidney, we have the ureter that goes to the urinary bladder, the urethra, and that will sit right on top of the reproductive system. Now, if we take a look now at the other side of your diagram, which would be the male reproductive system. We're going to see that the male reproductive system is actually kind of similar in setup. If you keep that model in mind, I always like to show the female first, because in the male reproductive system, it's going to be actually quite similar. Okay, so let's start down here with the testy. Okay, the testy in the male is obviously going to be on the outside of the body, down in the scrotum itself. And so you're going to see that we have the testy is going to be responsible for making sperm, and it actually makes sperm all throughout a male's life. That's a little bit different than the female. And another slight difference is we actually have a point where it's fused, the tube is actually fused to the testy. And so that fusion point is referred to as the epididymis. Okay, kind of a strange word, but that's a receiving chamber for the sperm, and it actually matures the sperm in there. The cells themselves are immature here. They're going to be matured in the epididymis, and then we have this cord that comes out of the epididymis called the vas deferens. Okay, the vas deferens actually come out of the scrotum, and it goes following the body cavity and up into the abdominal wall, way up higher than people would think, and they go into the body cavity here. Okay, now again, we've got this other thing of the urinary system, so the urinary bladder is going to be right here. And coming out of the urinary bladder is going to be the urethra. Okay, so the same concept is going to be the same thing that we saw in the female. However, what we're going to find is just below that, that the vas deferens and the urethra are going to pass through the first of the reproductive glands. Okay, this first gland is the prostate. Most people have heard of the prostate, and it poses some problems within older males because that prostate does mature, and it is a gland, so you've seen glands before in dissections, and so that gland could actually pinch off some of those tubes, especially with the urethra, and so people have problems urinating and so on. So it's a problem where the gland itself is pinched off that opening. Now, the three tubes of the two vas deferens and the one urethra actually keep passing through, and the prostate itself just adds seminal fluid. What's in semen is actually a fluid to help the cells get a little bit more mobility, gets a food source for those cells to stay alive, and a little bit of lubrication and a little bit of kind of an antacid to reduce the more acid environment of the vagina itself. Now, another gland that goes through, most people have not heard of this one, it's called the kind of a strange word, bulbourethral gland. Okay, I know it's messy to see, but you've got that on your diagram as well. That bulbourethral gland is actually where those three tubes will actually fuse together into one. So here's one of the other differences between the male and the female is the male reproductive system actually does fuse with the urinary system. So we see that one tube. Now after that, basically, this is the beginning of the penis itself. So there's only one tube that goes down here that's reproductive and urinary in nature, and it is kind of one of those weird things in the cat where the head of the penis is actually a little bit more pointed on the cat itself. Okay, so this is the penis itself. It starts on the inside of the body, extends to the outside of the body. So that's the reproductive system, if you will, just diagrammatically. Again, it's not a very pretty drawing, but you get the idea of how this system is set up. Now you're ready to move on into the actual dissections and see the real thing.